My name is Margaret, and I'm 53 years old. Right now, I'm lying in a pre-op room, staring at the ceiling tiles, counting them because there's nothing else to do and nobody here to hold my hand. My phone buzzes, I pick it up, and there's a text from my son Daniel. It's a photo of him at the airport, grinning wide, champagne glass raised high. His arm around his mother-in-law Constance, who's wearing a ridiculous oversized sun hat indoors. The caption reads, "At the gate. Paris, here we come. Mom says hi. Today is my surgery day. Major cardiac procedure. Life or death stuff. And my son is at the airport. With her." The door opens, and my surgeon walks in. Dr. Thornton, professional and calm. She glances at my phone screen, still lit up with that photo, and her face goes completely pale. She stares at the image for a long moment, then looks at me with an expression I can't quite read. "Mrs. Patterson," she says slowly, "we need to talk about that photo. Before we dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel because what I'm about to tell you will shock you to your core. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single detail of how this all unfolded. Now, let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. 6 months before that terrible morning in the hospital, my life looked perfect from the outside. I lived in a comfortable home in suburban Connecticut with my husband Howard, who I'd been married to for 30 years. Our son Daniel was 28, successful, and had been married for 2 years to a woman named Vivian, who was 26 and owned a boutique in town. They seemed happy, and I was so proud of the life Daniel had built for himself. He worked as a financial analyst, made good money, drove a nice car, and always dressed sharp. Vivian was beautiful, always put together, always smiling in that polished way that made you feel like you were looking at a magazine cover instead of a real person. About a year ago, Vivian's mother Constance moved to our area. She was 55, a widow, and apparently quite wealthy from her late husband's estate. She bought a gorgeous house just 15 minutes from Daniel and Vivian's place, which I thought was lovely at first. Family close by. What could be better? I worked as a school librarian, a job I'd held for 23 years, and I loved it. I loved the kids, the books, the quiet rhythm of my days. But about 8 months ago, I started having chest pains. The doctors ran tests and found that I had a serious heart condition that would require surgery. It was scary, but I tried to stay positive. I had my family, I told myself. They would help me through this. We had a tradition in our family of Sunday dinners at my house. I would cook, usually something Daniel loved from when he was a kid, pot roast or lasagna, or my special fried chicken. Howard would set the table. Daniel and Vivian would arrive with wine, and we'd sit around laughing and talking about our weeks. It was my favorite time, those Sunday evenings when my house felt full and warm and alive. But then things started to shift in small ways I didn't quite notice at first. Daniel began canceling more often, always with a work excuse. "Sorry, Mom. Big project deadline," or "client dinner came up last minute." Vivian would text sweet apologies and promise they'd make it up to me next week, sometimes sending over an expensive bottle of wine as a peace offering. Then Constance started showing up to the dinners even when Daniel and Vivian couldn't make it. She'd call me on Saturday and say, "Margaret, dear, I heard you're cooking tomorrow, and I'm just rattling around in that big house all alone. Mind if I join you and Howard?" What could I say? No. You can't come to dinner? That would be cruel. So she came. And she'd sit at my table and make little comments that seemed harmless on the surface but left me feeling small. "Oh, this roast is quite well done, isn't it? I suppose some people prefer it that way." Or, "You know, Margaret, if you used fresh herbs instead of dried, the flavor would really pop." Just a thought. Howard never seemed to notice. He was too busy talking about his golf game or his retirement plans. He'd retired early from his accounting firm and now spent most of his time at the country club. As my health got worse, as the surgery date got closer, I found myself needing my family more and more. The chest pains were coming more frequently. I was tired all the time, and simple tasks left me breathless. I told Daniel about the surgery date as soon as it was scheduled. It was set for June 15th, and the doctor said it was serious, that there were risks, but that it was necessary if I wanted to keep living. When I told him, Daniel's face showed concern. He hugged me tight and said, "Mom, don't worry. I'll be there. You're my priority." Those words meant everything to me. I held on to them like a lifeline. My son would be there. I wouldn't face this alone. But Constance was at that dinner too, and when she heard the date, something flickered across her face. She glanced at Vivian, and Vivian glanced back, and some unspoken message passed between them that I didn't understand. I should have paid more attention to that look. I should have known something was wrong right then. 3 months before my surgery, I turned 53. I didn't want anything big or fancy, just a small family dinner with the people I loved most. I spent the whole day cooking despite the chest pains that kept making me stop and catch my breath. I made Daniel's favorite pot roast, the one he'd been making since he was 7 years old and came home from school requesting it every single week. I made mashed potatoes from scratch, green beans with almonds, homemade rolls, and I baked a chocolate cake with buttercream frosting. The table was set with my good china, candles lit, everything perfect. Howard had to leave at the last minute. There was some emergency golf tournament. Someone had dropped out and they needed a fourth. I told him to go. I still had Daniel coming, I thought. 6 o'clock came and went. "No Daniel." I texted him. No response. 6:30. 7. The food was getting cold. I tried calling, straight to voicemail. By 7:30, I was sitting alone at that table staring at the empty chairs, and my phone finally buzzed. A text from Daniel. "So sorry, Mom. Emergency with Vivian's mom. Had to help out. I'll make it up to you, I promise." I called him immediately. No answer. I called Vivian. No answer. I even called Constance's number, which I had for emergencies. No answer from her either. So I sat there in my quiet house with all that food and those candles burning down, and I ate dinner by myself. I cut a small slice of cake, sang happy birthday to myself in a whisper, and then I went to bed and cried until my pillow was soaked through. The next morning, I woke up determined to let it go. These things happen, I told myself. Maybe it really was an emergency, but then I got on social media. Something I didn't do much, but occasionally checked to see photos of Daniel and Vivian. One of Vivian's friends had posted pictures from the night before, tagged with the location of one of the most expensive French restaurants in the city, the kind of place where you need reservations months in advance. The photos showed Daniel in a suit, smiling huge, sitting next to Vivian in a gorgeous dress, and across from them was Constance, dripping in jewelry, holding up a champagne glass. The caption read, "The most amazing dinner celebrating my beautiful friend's incredible mother-in-law. What a woman." And Daniel had commented on the post. His comment said, "Best night ever with my 2 favorite ladies." I stared at that comment for probably 20 minutes. 2 favorite ladies. Not 3. 2. I read it over and over until the words stopped making sense. They hadn't been at an emergency. They'd been at a fancy restaurant celebrating Constance on my birthday, and Daniel had lied to me. When he finally called me back that afternoon, I tried to bring it up gently. "Daniel, honey, I saw the photos from last night. You were at dinner." His response was sharp and defensive. "Mom, yeah, it was last minute. I told you I texted you." I said, "But you said it was an emergency with Constance." He sighed like I was exhausting him. "It was. She was upset. Needed cheering up. We took her to dinner." "What's the big deal?" I felt my throat tighten. "Daniel, it was my birthday. You promised you'd be there." He was quiet for a second. Then, "Mom, you're being dramatic. It was just a birthday. You have one every year." Vivian's voice came through in the background. I could hear her saying something like, "Is she upset? Tell her well, make it up to her." And then Constance's voice, that smooth, sweet voice. "Daniel, darling, don't let her guilt trip you." Daniel came back on the line. "Mom, I have to go." "Well, do something next week, okay?" He hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding the phone, feeling like the ground had disappeared from under my feet. When I tried to talk to Howard about it, he just shrugged. "Honey, the kids are busy. They didn't mean to hurt you. Let it go." But I couldn't let it go because the next Sunday when I invited everyone to dinner, Daniel said they couldn't make it, but Constance showed up anyway, with a store-bought pie and that smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Poor Margaret," she said. Still upset about the birthday thing? Daniel told me. You know, dear, he's a grown man with his own life now. Perhaps if you gave him a bit more space and made more of an effort to be understanding, he'd want to spend more time with you. I actually apologized. I apologized to her. I said, "You're right. I shouldn't have made such a fuss." And she patted my hand like I was a child who'd finally learned her lesson. That night, lying in bed, I realized something was very, very wrong. My son was slipping away from me, and I had no idea how to stop it. When my doctor officially scheduled the surgery and explained just how serious it was, I gathered my family to tell them. It was a Sunday dinner, one of the rare ones where Daniel and Vivian actually showed up, though Constance came too. She always seemed to be there now. I waited until after we'd eaten. Then I cleared my throat and said I had something important to share. The room went quiet. The doctor scheduled my heart surgery. I said, "It's on June 15th. It's major. They'll have to open my chest, repair the valve, and I'll be in the hospital for at least a week, maybe more. And then recovery at home for weeks after that." I looked right at Daniel when I said it, and for just a moment I saw real concern flash across his face. "Mom," he said, "that's really serious." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I felt tears prick my eyes. This was my son. He did care. He would be there for me. But then Constance made a small sound, a little gasp, and everyone turned to look at her. "Oh my," she said, pressing her hand to her chest dramatically. "June 15th? That's the week of Paris Fashion Week." Vivian's whole face lit up like she'd just won the lottery. "Mother, you're right. You've been talking about going to Paris during Fashion Week for years." Constance looked at Vivian with this excited, conspiratorial expression, then glanced at Daniel. "Oh, but no, I couldn't possibly. Not with Margaret's surgery." But her tone made it clear she absolutely could possibly and was already planning it. Vivian turned to Daniel, touching his arm in that gentle way she had. "Daniel, you know how much this would mean to my mother. She's been through so much since Dad died." I watched Daniel look at me, then at Vivian, then back at me. I could see the conflict on his face. "I don't know," he said slowly. "My mom needs me." I felt a rush of gratitude. "Daniel, honey, yes, I really do need you there." But Constance laughed, this tinkling, dismissive laugh that made me feel about 2 inches tall. "Margaret, don't be selfish, dear. Howard will be there with you. The young people should be able to live their lives. You can't expect Daniel to put his entire existence on hold just because you're having a little procedure." A little procedure. That's what she called my potentially life-threatening open-heart surgery. A little procedure. Howard, bless his oblivious heart, actually nodded. "She's got a point, honey. I'll be there with you. Let the kids go have some fun. You'll be fine." Over the next 2 weeks, I watched as Constance and Vivian worked on Daniel like sculptors shaping clay. They'd have lunch with him, the 3 of them, without me. They'd go shopping together. Vivian would show up at his office with Constance to take him to dinner. And slowly, gradually, I could see Daniel's resolve crumbling. I overheard a phone call one afternoon when Id stopped by their house to drop off some books Vivian had asked to borrow. Daniel didn't know I was there. I heard him on the phone in the other room. "I don't know, Constance. It feels wrong to leave my mom during surgery." And Constance's voice, smooth as honey. "Daniel, darling, your mother has been manipulating you your whole life. This is just another guilt trip. She has Howard. She'll be perfectly fine. But my daughter, your wife, really wants to do this for me. And it would break her heart if you said no. Don't let your mother control you like this." I left the books on the counter and walked out before anyone saw me. Manipulating him? My whole life? I had never manipulated Daniel. I'd loved him, supported him, sacrificed for him like every mother does. But now somehow I was the villain in this story they were all writing. 2 weeks before my surgery, Daniel called me. His voice was stiff, formal, like he was reciting a script. "Mom, I've thought about it a lot. And I've decided to go to Paris with Vivian and Constance. You're going to be fine. It's just surgery. People have them all the time. And Dad will be there. I'll come see you as soon as we get back." I felt like head punched me in the stomach. "Daniel, I could die on that table. Do you understand that?" This isn't a small thing." His response was cold. "Mom, you're not going to die. Stop being so dramatic. I'll see you when I get back." After he hung up, I sat on my couch and stared at the wall for hours. My son was choosing a vacation with his mother-in-law over being with me during the scariest moment of my life, and somehow, in his mind, I was the one being unreasonable. Constance had completely rewritten the narrative. She'd turned me from a loving mother into a manipulative burden, and the worst part was that I could see it happening, could watch my son slipping further and further away, and I was powerless to stop it. That night, when Howard came home from golf, I tried to tell him how serious this was, how wrong it felt. He patted my shoulder absently. "Honey, you're overthinking it. Daniel's a good kid. He'll come around." But I knew the truth. Daniel was already gone. Constance had won. The week before my surgery was the longest week of my life. I tried to prepare for what was coming. Tried to get my affairs in order. Tried to make lists of what I'd need during recovery. I called Daniel multiple times asking if he could help me plan for the post-surgery care, figure out who would help me at home during those first critical days. Every time I called, he was too busy. "Mom, I can't right now. I'm at work." "Mom, we're packing for the trip." "Mom, ask Dad to help you with that stuff." So I turned to Howard, my husband of 30 years, the man who'd promised to be there in sickness and in health. "Howard, after the surgery, I'm going to need a lot of help. Can you make sure you're available those first 2 weeks?" He looked up from his golf magazine with a confused expression. "Oh, honey. I've got that tournament in Hilton Head the week after your surgery. I scheduled it 6 months ago, remember? But you'll be mostly recovered by then, right?" I felt my chest tighten, and not from the heart condition. "Howard, I'll be in the hospital for at least a week, and then I'll need help at home for weeks after. I can't lift anything, can't drive, can't even shower by myself at first." He frowned. "Well, maybe reschedule the surgery then? I can't cancel on my golf buddies. We've got money on this tournament." I stared at my husband and realized with horrible clarity that he cared more about his golf game than my life. I tried calling my sister Beatrice in California, hoping she could fly out to help. She answered on the 4th ring. Distracted, rushed. "Meg, I'm so sorry. I've got this huge project at work. I can't take time off right now. You understand, right? You'll be fine. Hospitals take good care of people." Everyone kept saying that, "You'll be fine." Like it was a certainty. Like surgery wasn't a risk. Like I wasn't terrified of going under anesthesia and never waking up. 3 days before the surgery, I had a full-blown panic attack. I couldn't breathe. My heart was racing. I thought I was dying right there in my kitchen. I called Daniel, sobbing, unable to get words out. He answered, and I could hear the irritation in his voice immediately. "Mom, what's wrong? Are you okay?" I managed to gasp out. "I'm so scared. Please, Daniel, I need you." He sighed, long and heavy, like I was the biggest burden in the world. "Mom, stop being so dramatic. People have surgeries every single day. You're going to be fine. You need to get control of yourself." In the background, I heard Vivian say, "Is it your mom again? Tell her we have to finish packing." And then Constance's laugh, bright and delighted, like all of this was just the most amusing thing. The day before my surgery, I had to go for pre-op blood work and final checks. Howard said he'd take me, but he needed to run an errand first. So I drove myself to the hospital, did all the tests alone, listened to all the scary instructions alone, signed all the consent forms that basically said I understood I could die on the table, all alone. On my way back to the car, I had to stop at the mall to pick up some compression socks the hospital said I'd need. And that's when I saw it. Daniel's car, parked right out front. My heart leaped. Maybe he'd come looking for me. Maybe he'd changed his mind. Maybe he did care after all. I walked into the mall and followed the sound of laughter, and there they were. In a high-end luggage store, Daniel and Vivian and Constance, surrounded by expensive suitcases and bags, trying on ridiculous berets and taking selfies. I stood behind a pillar and watched them for I don't know how long. They were so happy. Daniel was laughing, really laughing. The way he used to laugh when he was young and we'd play games together on the living room floor. Constance had her arm around him, was whispering something in his ear, and he nodded and smiled at her with such warmth. They looked like a family, a happy family, and I was the outsider, watching through the glass. They never saw me. I walked back to my car and sat in the parking lot for an hour, crying so hard I thought I might throw up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and listening to Howard snore beside me. And I wrote a letter to my family. If something happens during surgery tomorrow, I wrote out instructions for my funeral, where my jewelry should go, how to access my bank accounts. I wrote a letter to Daniel telling him I loved him no matter what, that I forgave him, that I hoped he'd be happy. I sealed it and put it in my nightstand drawer. The morning of the surgery, Howard drove me to the hospital, but had to circle back to move the car because he couldn't find parking. "I'll meet you inside," he said, and drove off. So I walked into that massive hospital alone, carrying my little overnight bag, and checked myself in at the surgical desk. The waiting room was full of other patients, but they all had people with them, husbands holding wives' hands, adult children sitting close to their aging parents. One woman had what looked like her entire family there, kids and grandkids, all clustered around her telling her she'd be fine, and I sat by myself in a plastic chair, filling out forms with shaking hands. I checked my phone obsessively. Nothing from Daniel. Then finally, a text came through. "At the airport. So excited. Mom, you're going to do great. We believe in you." Attached was a photo. Daniel at the airport gate, holding a champagne glass, his other arm around Constance, who wore the most ridiculous oversized sun hat I'd ever seen. They were both grinning like they'd won the lottery. Vivian must have taken the photo, and there was Constance, right where I should have been, in the place of honor beside my son on an important day. Except it wasn't an important day for them. It was just the start of a vacation. My surgery, my terror, my possible death, was just a minor inconvenience they'd successfully avoided. My hands started shaking so badly I dropped my phone. A nurse came over and asked if I was okay. I wanted to say no. I'm not okay. My son abandoned me. My husband cares more about golf. I have nobody. I'm alone. I might die today and nobody cares. But instead, I just nodded and picked up my phone and let her lead me back to the pre-op area. That's where I was, sitting on that hospital bed in my gown, staring at that photo, when Dr. Thornton walked in, and everything changed. Rebecca Thornton was in her 50s, with kind eyes and steady hands and the sort of calm presence that made you trust her immediately. She'd been my cardiac surgeon for the past 3 months, walking me through every step of what would happen, answering every panicked question I had. She was professional and warm, and in a way she'd become more of a support system than my own family. When she walked into my pre-op room that morning, she smiled and said, "Mrs. Patterson, big day. Are you ready?" I tried to smile back, but I could feel my face crumbling. I held up my phone, still showing that photo of Daniel and Constance at the airport. "My son," I managed to say, my voice breaking. "He's on his way to Paris. With his mother-in-law. Today." Dr. Thornton looked at the phone, and I watched her professional mask slip for just a second. Her eyes widened, her jaw tightened, and she reached out and took the phone from my hand. She stared at that photo for a long time, zooming in, studying every detail. When she looked back up at me, her expression had completely changed. "Mrs. Patterson," she said slowly, "where exactly are they going in Paris? What hotel?" I shook my head. "I don't know. Some fancy place that Constance booked." "Why? What does it matter?" Dr. Thornton pulled up a chair and sat down right next to my hospital bed. "What's the mother-in-law's full name?" she asked. And there was something urgent in her voice now. "Constance," I said. "Constance Whitmore." "Dr. Thornton, what's going on?" She was quiet for a moment, and I watched emotions flicker across her face. Anger, pain, recognition, determination. Finally, she said, "Mrs. Patterson, Margaret, I need to tell you something. And I need you to listen very carefully, because this is going to sound insane, but I promise you it's true." She took a deep breath. 15 years ago, I was married to a man named James Thornton. We had 2 kids, a beautiful house, a good life. I was building my medical career. He was a successful real estate developer. We were happy, and then he hired a new secretary. Her name was Constance Whitmore. My blood went cold. Dr. Thornton continued, her voice steady, but her eyes showing the pain of old wounds reopened. Constance didn't just have an affair with my husband. She systematically destroyed our family. She started by befriending me. Actually, she'd bring coffee to my hospital, say such sweet things about how much James talked about me. I thought she was lovely, but the whole time, she was getting her hooks into him. She'd work late with him, go to conferences, slowly isolate him from me and our kids. She'd tell him I was too focused on my career, that I didn't appreciate him, that he deserved better. And James, God help him, he believed every word. She pulled out her phone and showed me old photos. I saw a younger Dr. Thornton with a handsome man and 2 teenage kids, all smiling at a beach somewhere. This was before, she said. Then she swiped to another photo. And my heart stopped. It was Constance, maybe 15 years younger but unmistakably her, with that same sharp smile and calculating eyes. That's her, Dr. Thornton said. That's the woman who destroyed my marriage. She convinced James that I was cold, that I was neglecting him, that our kids would be better off without my influence. She played the victim so well. Oh, poor Constance. Her own family doesn't appreciate her. She's so lonely, and James fell for it completely. He asked for a divorce, took her side in everything. Our kids were 16 and 14 when it happened, and they watched their father choose this woman over his own family. I felt sick to my stomach. Dr. Thornton kept going. The divorce was brutal. Constance had coached James on how to hide assets, how to make me look unstable. She'd record our arguments and edit them to make me sound crazy. She told everyone I was jealous and controlling. By the time it was over, James had turned most of our friends against me. I'd lost half my savings in legal fees, and my kids were traumatized. And you know what happened after that? Constance stayed with James for exactly 3 years. Long enough to get access to his money, his accounts, his business contacts. Then she bled him dry and left him. The stress killed him. Literally, he had a massive heart attack at 52 years old. And by then, Constance had already moved on to her next target. She swiped through more photos on her phone, showing me documents, old news articles. I've kept track of her over the years because I needed to understand what happened to my family. Constance is a professional, Margaret. This is what she does. She finds vulnerable, wealthy families, and she targets the mother-son relationship specifically. She knows that's the strongest bond, so that's what she breaks. She positions herself as the better mother, the understanding one, the one who doesn't judge or make demands. She makes the real mother look like the villain. And once she's replaced the mother in the son's eyes, she controls everything. His money, his decisions, his life. I was shaking now. Everything suddenly making horrible sense. She's been doing this to us, I whispered. Thornton nodded. Your son is her current project. I saw it the moment I looked at that photo. The way she's positioned next to him, that triumphant smile, the timing of this trip. She wanted him away from you today, specifically because this is when you're most vulnerable, when you most need him. And she's making sure he's with her instead. She's proving to him that she's more important than you are. I started crying. Ugly, desperate sobs. I've already lost him, haven't I? She's already won. Dr. Thornton grabbed both my hands and held them tight. No, she said fiercely. She hasn't won. Not yet. Because you have something Constance didn't count on. You have me. And I will be damned if I let that woman destroy another family. She stood up and pulled out her phone, making a call. We need to postpone this surgery for 30 minutes, she said to whoever answered. I need time with my patient. She looked back at me. Margaret, we're going to fight back. But first, I need you to tell me everything, every detail of how she got her claws into your son. Can you do that? I nodded, wiping my eyes. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. For the first time, someone believed me. Someone saw what was really happening, and that someone was going to help me save my son. Dr. Thornton didn't waste any time. Within minutes, she had a hospital attorney and a social worker in my pre-op room. and I was giving my full statement while they recorded everything. I told them about the Sunday dinners that stopped happening, about my birthday dinner that Daniel missed for Constance's celebration, about the gradual isolation and the constant gaslighting. I showed them text messages, social media posts, every piece of evidence I had on my phone. The attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia, took notes rapidly. Mrs. Patterson, has there been any financial involvement? Has your son given money to Constance or her daughter? I thought about it. I don't know for certain. But Daniel bought them both expensive gifts recently. A designer purse for Constance that I know cost at least $5,000. And he mentioned something about an investment opportunity Constance told him about. Dr. Thornton's expression darkened. That's how she works. She starts with small manipulations, then moves to financial control. She looked at Patricia. Can we get access to his accounts? Patricia shook her head. Not without his permission or a warrant, and we don't have grounds for that. But we can document everything we know. Over the next 20 minutes, they pieced together a timeline of Constance's manipulation. Every incident I described fit a pattern. The social worker, an older man named Robert, had actually worked on elder abuse cases before. This is textbook psychological abuse and financial exploitation, he said. But the victim here isn't just Mrs. Patterson. It's her son too. He's being manipulated. Dr. Thornton made more calls, and somehow, in that short time, she managed to connect with 2 other women whose families had been destroyed by Constance. One lived in Boston, one in Philadelphia. They joined via video call, and I listened to their stories with growing horror. It was the same pattern, exactly. Constance had targeted their sons, driven wedges between them and their mothers, taken control of finances, and then disappeared once she'd gotten what she wanted. One woman, her name was Helen, said through tears, "I haven't spoken to my son in 4 years. She convinced him I was an abusive mother. She took everything, and then she left him broken. He lost his job, his savings, everything. And by the time he realized what happened, I'd given up trying to reach him. We're strangers now." I felt rage building in my chest, hot and fierce. This woman had done this before, multiple times, and she was doing it to my family right now. How do we stop her? I asked. Dr. Thornton sat back down next to me. First, you survive this surgery. That's priority 1. Second, we document everything and we build a case. We need evidence of financial fraud, which means we need access to Daniel's accounts. Can you get that? I thought about it. I'm on his medical power of attorney. It might. If we can demonstrate that he's being unduly influenced, we might be able to get legal access. But we need time. The surgery was rescheduled for 45 minutes later than originally planned. Before they wheeled me back to the operating room, Dr. Thornton held my hand and said, "Margaret, I'm going to take excellent care of you. You're going to survive this, and then we're going to save your son." I didn't fight back when Constance destroyed my family, but I'm not making that mistake again. We're going to stop her. I went under anesthesia with those words ringing in my ears. It was the first time in months that I'd felt something other than despair. I felt hope, and I felt angry. Really, truly angry. Not at Daniel, but at the woman who'd stolen him from me. The surgery took 4 hours. When I woke up in recovery, groggy and in pain, the first face I saw was Dr. Thornton's. "You did beautifully," she said softly. "Everything went perfectly." I tried to smile, but my mouth was dry and I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. "Daniel," I managed to whisper. She shook her head. "No word from him, but that's okay. We expected that." She leaned closer. "Your husband is here, though. He showed up about an hour ago." "And Margaret?" I told him everything. "He knows what's been happening." Howard appeared at my bedside looking pale and shaken. "Maggie," he said, using the nickname he hadn't called me in years. I had no idea. Dr. Thornton explained everything about this Constance woman. "I thought I was just staying out of family drama, but I left you alone. I'm so sorry." Tears were running down his face. "I could have lost you today, and the last months I spent thinking about golf instead of being your husband. I'm so sorry." I reached for his hand weakly. "Help me fix this," I whispered. "Help me get our son back." He nodded, gripping my hand like he was afraid to let go. Whatever it takes. I promise. Doctor. Thornton pulled Howard aside while I drifted in and out of consciousness. And when I was more alert a few hours later, she came back with a plan. I have a private investigator I've used before, someone who helped me during my divorce. His name is Frank, and he's already started looking into Constance's background. We're going to find out everything about her, every lie, every previous victim, every fraud, and then we're going to bring it all to Daniel and make him see the truth. I wanted to ask how, wanted to know the details, but exhaustion pulled me back under. As I fell asleep, I heard Dr. Thornton say to Howard, "Your wife is a fighter. She's going to be okay, and so is your family." While I was lying in that hospital bed recovering from surgery, fighting through pain and medication, and the horrible loneliness of knowing my son hadn't called, I found out the details later, from his credit card statements and from Daniel himself when everything came crashing down. Constance had booked them a luxury suite at a 5-star hotel with a view of the Eiffel Tower. The entire trip cost nearly $50,000, and Daniel later admitted that Constance had paid for all of it, insisting it was her treat for her favorite son-in-law. They spent their days shopping on the Champs-Élysées, eating at Michelin-starred restaurants, taking sunset boat rides on the Seine. Constance made sure every moment was perfect, every experience was magical, every memory would bind Daniel closer to her. On the third day of the trip, Daniel finally thought about calling me. He told me later that he was sitting at a cafe with an espresso, watching people walk by, and suddenly he felt this pang of guilt. He tried calling the house. Howard answered, and Daniel said his father's voice sounded strange, cold. "How's Mom?" Daniel asked. Howard, following Dr. Thornton's instructions to not tip our hand too early, simply said, "She's resting." Daniel felt relief wash over him. See, he thought. She was fine. Just like everyone said. "When are you coming home?" Howard asked. And there was an edge to the question. "In a week," Daniel answered. "We've got the whole trip planned out." Howard was quiet for a moment, then said something that apparently stuck with Daniel. "Family, right? That's what this trip is about." And he hung up before Daniel could respond. Daniel said that conversation unsettled him, but Constance was right there to smooth everything over. "Your father is probably just stressed from the hospital," she said sweetly. "Why don't we go do something fun? Take your mind off things." And they did. They went to Versailles. They climbed to the top of the Eiffel Tower. They attended a fashion show that Constance had somehow gotten tickets to. Vivian posted constantly on social media. And I saw every post from my hospital bed, each one a knife to my heart. Photos of Daniel looking happy and carefree. Photos of Constance with her arm around him captioned "My bonus son." Photos of the three of them toasting with expensive wine. Not once did anyone post anything about me. I didn't exist in their perfect Paris vacation. But while they were living that fantasy, Dr. Thornton's investigator Frank was uncovering the nightmare. Frank was in his 60s, a former police detective who specialized in fraud cases, and he worked fast. Within 3 days, he had Constance's entire history laid out in a detailed report that was honestly terrifying to read. Her real name was Connie Whitman, and she'd been born in a working-class neighborhood in Philadelphia. She'd changed her name and created an entirely fake background of wealth and privilege. She'd been married 4 times, and each marriage had followed the same pattern. She'd find a wealthy man, usually one with an adult son, marry him, spend a few years systematically isolating him from his family and taking control of his finances, and then divorce him and take half of everything. Or in some cases, she'd stay married just long enough to be named in his will, then wait for him to die. Frank's report included interviews with 3 of her previous stepsons, men whose fathers she'd married and whose families she'd destroyed. All of them told the same story. Constance had come into their lives acting sweet and kind, had slowly turned their fathers against their mothers or siblings, had gained complete financial control, and had left devastation in her wake. One man, his name was Robert and he was 42 now, said that his father died alone because Constance had convinced him that Robert was only after his money. "I tried for years to reconcile with my dad," Robert told Frank, "but she'd poisoned him against me so completely that he wouldn't even take my calls. He died thinking I hated him." She sold his house, took his savings, and disappeared. "I didn't even know where she went," The financial forensics were even worse. Frank traced Daniel's bank accounts, and what he found made me physically ill. Over the past year, Daniel had transferred $120,000 to various accounts connected to Constance. It was done in increments, nothing large enough to trigger bank alerts, but it was steady and consistent. Daniel thought he was investing in opportunities Constance had told him about, opportunities that would make him wealthy. But every single one was fake. The companies didn't exist. The investments were phantom. Constance had been systematically stealing from my son, and he had no idea. Dr. Thornton brought all of this to me on day 4 of my recovery. I was sitting up in bed, still connected to monitors and IVs, still in pain but getting stronger. She handed me the report and watched as I read through it. When I got to the part about the money, I actually gasped out loud. "She's stolen over $100,000 from him," I said, "and he doesn't even know." Dr. Thornton nodded grimly. "That's how she works. She's a professional. She knows exactly how to manipulate wealthy targets, and your son was perfect for her. Successful, trusting, with a complicated family dynamic she could exploit." The hospital room door opened, and a young man walked in. It was Marcus, Daniel's oldest friend from high school. They'd been inseparable growing up, but I realized I hadn't seen Marcus in over a year. He looked shocked when he saw me, pale and thin in that hospital bed. "Mrs. Patterson," he said. "What happened? Where's Daniel?" I told him everything, the whole story, and watched his expression go from confusion to anger. "That explains so much," he said when I finished. "Daniel's been different this past year. He stopped answering my calls, stopped coming to our poker nights. I thought maybe he was just busy with married life. But whenever I did see him, Vivian and her mom were always there. They were always around him." Marcus pulled up a chair. "Mrs. Patterson, I want to help. Daniel's my best friend. And this is insane. What do you need me to do?" And that's how our team grew. Dr. Thornton, Howard, Frank the investigator, Marcus, and me. We spent the next several days planning exactly how to confront Daniel when he returned from Paris, how to present all the evidence in a way that would break through Constance's manipulation. Dr. Thornton reached out to a psychologist who specialized in cult deprogramming, because that's essentially what this was. Constance had created a cult of personality around herself, and Daniel was her devoted follower. Breaking him free was going to take more than just showing him documents. It was going to take a carefully planned intervention. Daniel, Vivian, and Constance returned from Paris 10 days after my surgery. I was home by then, still weak and recovering, sleeping most of the day, and struggling to do simple tasks. Howard had become my constant companion, helping me with everything, clearly trying to make up for months of neglect. But Daniel didn't come home. He didn't come to see me. Instead, he went straight to Constance's house with Vivian, and they spent the whole day there, unpacking, sharing stories about the trip, posting more photos online. I watched from my bed as the pictures went up, each one another twist of the knife. Marcus texted me. "He still hasn't called you." I texted back. "No." I finally called Daniel myself. It took him 4 rings to answer. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice distracted. "I'm home from the hospital," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "I thought you might want to come see me." He was quiet for a second. "Oh, yeah, definitely." I felt something break inside me. "Daniel, I almost died on that operating table. And you haven't even asked how I'm doing." He sighed, that same exhausted sigh I'd heard so many times now. "Mom, you're fine. You're home, you're talking. Clearly you're okay. Stop trying to make me feel guilty. I'll come visit when I can, all right?" And he hung up. Dr. Thornton had warned me this would happen. "Hez fully under her influence now," Shed said. "We need to do the intervention soon, before she convinces him to do something more drastic." The plan was set. We would invite Daniel over for what we'd call an important financial discussion, something to do with family estate planning. Constance would insist on coming. We knew that, and we were counting on it, because we wanted her there. We wanted her to face what Shed done. The invitation went out through Howard. "Daniel, I need you to come over this Saturday. We need to discuss some changes to the family finances." "It's important," Daniel agreed. "But only," we found out later, because Constance told him to. It might be about inheritance, Shed said. You should definitely be there. Saturday came. I was still weak, but I was determined. Howard helped me get dressed in real clothes for the first time in 2 weeks, helped me walk downstairs, helped me sit in the living room on the couch. Dr. Thornton was there, and Frank the investigator, and Marcus. Wed also asked Patricia the hospital attorney to be present. Wed set up a laptop with video calls ready to go from Constance's previous victims. We had printed documents, bank statements, everything organized in folders. We were ready for war. Daniel arrived with Vivian and Constance at 2 in the afternoon. When they walked in and saw all the people in the living room, Daniel's expression changed from confusion to suspicion. "What's going on?" he asked. He looked at me sitting on the couch, and I saw him really see me for the first time in months. I was thin, pale, weak, and I had a scar down my chest that was visible at the neckline of my shirt. For just a second, I saw guilt flash across his face, but then Constance put her hand on his arm and the expression vanished. "Margaret," Constance said in her sweetest voice, "what's all this? We thought this was about family finances." Howard stood up, and I'd never seen him look so serious. "It is about finances, Daniel. It's about the $120,000 you've given to Constance over the past year." The room went dead silent. Daniel's face went white. "How do you know about that?" he whispered. Frank stepped forward and handed Daniel a folder. "Because we investigated. My name is Frank Callahan. I'm a private investigator specializing in financial fraud. And Constance Whitmore, or should I say Connie Whitman, has defrauded you of over $120,000. Vivian made a small sound of shock. Constance's face remained perfectly calm, but her eyes had gone hard and cold. "This is absurd," she said. "Daniel, we should leave." But Daniel was opening the folder, reading the bank statements, seeing his own transactions laid out in black and white. Every transfer, every fake investment, every lie. "What is this?" he said, his voice shaking. Dr. Thornton stood up. "Daniel, do you remember me? I'm your mother's surgeon. But I'm also someone who knows Constance very well, because 15 years ago, she destroyed my family the exact same way she's destroying yours. You went to Paris with the woman who's been stealing from you, and you left your mother to face surgery alone." Daniel finally looked at me. Really looked, and I saw his face crumble. "Mom," he whispered. Constance stepped forward, her voice sharp now. "This is a setup, Daniel. Your mother is manipulating you. Can't you see? She's jealous of our relationship. She's always been jealous." But Dr. Thornton was ready. She pulled out her phone and showed Daniel old photos of her family. Showed him pictures of Constance from 15 years ago with her late husband. Her name was Constance Whitmore then, too. Dr. Thornton said, "Same woman, same tactics, same devastation. She has a psychological profile, Daniel. She's a narcissist who targets mother-son relationships because she gets satisfaction from replacing the mother. She did it to my family, to these men's families, and she's been doing it to yours." Patricia presented the psychological profile, the pattern of behavior, the legal definition of undue influence. Frank showed Daniel how the investment accounts Constance had told him about didn't exist, how the money had simply disappeared into offshore accounts. Howard talked about how Constance had slowly isolated Daniel from his family, how Shed rewritten the narrative to make me the villain, and through it all, Daniel just stood there, holding those papers, his whole world crumbling around him. Vivian was crying now, looking at her mother with horror. "Mom, is this true? Did you do all this?" Constance's mask finally slipped completely. She looked at all of us with pure hatred. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Daniel loves me. He chose me. Because I'm a better mother than Margaret ever was." That's when Daniel finally broke. "Don't you dare," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "Don't you dare talk about my mother like that." He looked at me sitting on that couch, and I saw tears streaming down his face. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. What have I done?" Constance tried to leave, tried to grab her purse and walk out, but Frank blocked the door. "You're not going anywhere, Miss Whitman. The police are waiting outside." And they were. Wed arranged everything with the local authorities. Fraud charges, theft by deception, And in my case, emotional abuse of a vulnerable adult, given my heart condition. 2 officers came in and read Constance her rights while she screamed that this was all lies, that Daniel would defend her, that we'd all regret this. But Daniel just stood there watching her get handcuffed, watching her get led away, and he said nothing. He looked shattered, broken, like he was waking up from a nightmare and realizing it was all real. After Constance was gone, Vivian collapsed into a chair sobbing. "I didn't know it was this bad," she kept saying. "She told me Margaret was toxic. She told me we were helping Daniel escape an unhealthy relationship. I believed her. I'm so sorry. Mrs. Patterson, I'm so sorry." I looked at this young woman who'd been manipulated by her own mother her whole life, who'd been turned into an accomplice without even realizing it. And I felt pity instead of anger. "You were her victim too," I said quietly. Daniel fell to his knees in front of me, his head in his hands, and he cried like I hadn't seen him cry since he was a little boy. "Mom, I left you. I left you alone during surgery. I chose her over you. I believed her when she said you were manipulating me. How do I fix this? How do I ever make this right?" I reached out with my weak hand and touched his hair. "You start by being here now," I said. "That's all I ever wanted, Daniel, just for you to be here." 2 months passed after that terrible, necessary confrontation. Constance was in county jail, awaiting trial, her bail set impossibly high because she was considered a flight risk. The prosecutor said she was looking at 5 to 7 years for fraud and theft, possibly more once they looked into her previous victims. Daniel's money was partially recovered, about $60,000 of it, but the rest was gone into accounts we couldn't trace. But Daniel said he didn't care about the money. "I'd pay 10 times that to undo what I did to you, Mom," he told me one night as we sat in the kitchen. Head moved back home temporarily into his old bedroom because Vivian had moved out and he couldn't stand to be in their apartment alone. Those first weeks were hard. Daniel and I had to learn how to talk to each other again, how to exist in the same space without the weight of all that betrayal hanging between us. Some days we'd sit at the kitchen table, and the silence would be so heavy I could barely breathe. Other days he'd break down crying and apologize over and over until I had to tell him to stop because I couldn't take any more apologies. What I needed was for him to show me through his actions that he understood what he'd done, and slowly, painfully, he did. He drove me to every follow-up doctor's appointment. He helped me with physical therapy exercises. He made me breakfast and lunch and dinner, relearning my favorite foods like he was relearning who I was. Dr. Thornton became one of my closest friends through all of this. We'd meet for coffee once a week at a cafe near the hospital, and we'd talk about Constance, about manipulation, about how to heal from betrayal. Shed started a support group for family members who'd been victimized by people like Constance, and I joined it. Sitting in a room with other mothers who'd lost their children to manipulative in-laws or step-parents or partners, hearing their stories and sharing mine was more healing than any therapy could have been. We weren't alone. This happened to so many families, more than anyone wanted to admit. Howard transformed too. He quit his golf obsession cold turkey, just stopped going to the country club, stopped talking about tournaments, stopped caring about his handicap. "I spent our entire retirement so far chasing a little white ball around grass," he said to me one night, "when I should have been chasing you. Making sure you were happy. Making sure you felt loved." He took over the cooking some nights, giving me a break. He'd sit with me during my worst pain days and just hold my hand. We started watching old movies together in the evenings, something we used to do when we were first married but had stopped decades ago. It felt like we were learning how to be married again, properly this time. Daniel's journey was the hardest to watch. He was so angry at himself, so filled with guilt and shame that some days he could barely function. He'd wake up and the first thing he'd do was apologize to me. He couldn't seem to accept that I'd forgiven him, or at least that I was working on forgiving him. "Mom, I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said one night, about 3 months after everything came out. "I was cruel to you. I abandoned you. I believed lies about you without even questioning them." I looked at my son, this grown man who was broken in ways I wasn't sure could be fully repaired, and I told him the truth. "Daniel, you were manipulated by a professional, a woman who's done this to multiple families, who knew exactly what buttons to push. Yes, you made choices. Yes, you hurt me. But you were also a victim. Vivian and Daniel were officially separated, though they hadn't filed for divorce yet. She was living in her mother's old apartment, the one Constance wouldn't be returning to, and she was in therapy 3 times a week. She sent me a letter about 4 months after the confrontation. It was long, detailed, heartbreaking. She wrote about growing up with Constance, about how her whole childhood had been about learning to manipulate people, to play roles, to never trust anyone. My mother trained me, she wrote, to see relationships as transactions, to see other women as competition. When I met Daniel, she immediately started working on separating him from you because she saw you as a threat to her control over me and through me, over him. I participated in it because I didn't know any other way to be. But Mrs. Patterson, I'm learning now. I'm learning what real love looks like, what healthy family relationships are supposed to be. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I needed you to know that I'm sorry for the role I played in hurting you. I read that letter 3 times, and then I cried. Because Vivian was a victim too. Maybe the biggest victim of all. She'd been raised by a monster who'd taught her monstrous things, and now she was trying to unlearn a lifetime of toxic patterns. I wrote her back. I didn't offer forgiveness, because I wasn't there yet and maybe it'd never be. But I told her I saw her trying and that mattered. I told her that healing was possible if she kept doing the work. And I told her that if she and Daniel decided to try again someday, I would keep an open mind. 6 months after my surgery, Constance went to trial. Daniel attended every day of it, sitting in the gallery, watching as victim after victim testified against her. The prosecution had found 5 families Shed destroyed, 5 men Shed defrauded, 5 mothers whose relationships with their sons Shed poisoned. The evidence was overwhelming. Her own daughter Vivian testified against her, describing a childhood of manipulation and abuse. When it was Daniel's turn to testify, I watched from the gallery as he walked to the stand, was sworn in, and then told his story calmly and clearly. He talked about how Constance had slowly isolated him from me, how Shed rewritten every memory to make me the villain and her the hero, how Head trusted her completely. And then, at the end of his testimony, Constance's defense attorney made a huge mistake. He tried to suggest that Daniel had gone to Paris willingly, that nobody had forced him to abandon his mother. Mr. Patterson, the attorney said, you're a grown man. You made choices. Isn't it true that you simply didn't care enough about your mother to be there for her surgery? I watched Daniel's face harden. He looked directly at Constance, sitting at the defense table in her perfect suit with her perfect hair, still maintaining that expression of wounded innocence. You want to know the truth, Daniel said. The truth is that woman sitting right there is evil. She's a predator who targets families and rips them apart for money and for sport. She got inside my head and made me believe my own mother was my enemy. She made me believe that going to Paris while my mother had open-heart surgery was not just acceptable, but admirable. She's a psychological abuser and a thief, and if I could go back and change everything, I would. But I can't. So instead, I'm here, testifying, hoping that she gets exactly what she deserves. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Constance was sentenced to 5 years in prison for fraud, theft by deception, and financial exploitation of vulnerable adults. As they led her away in handcuffs, she tried one last manipulation. She looked at Daniel and said in that sweet voice, Daniel, darling, you know I love you. Tell them this is all a mistake. But Daniel just looked at her with cold eyes and said, You're not my family. You never were. And he turned his back and walked away. I was so proud of him in that moment I thought my heart might burst. The months after the trial were about rebuilding. Daniel went back to work, but started seeing a therapist who specialized in cult deprogramming and manipulation recovery. He said it was helping him understand how Constance had gotten inside his head, how to recognize those patterns so they'd never work on him again. He started spending real time with me again. Not just obligatory visits, but genuine quality time. We'd watch cooking shows together, and then try to make the recipes. We'd go for slow walks around the neighborhood during my continued recovery. We'd sit on the porch in the evenings and talk about everything and nothing. He was relearning who I was, and I was relearning who he was without Constance's poison between us. One evening about a year after my surgery, We were sitting in the backyard watching fireflies, and Daniel said quietly, "Mom, can I ask you something?" I nodded. "How did you forgive me? How did you let me back into your life after everything I did?" I thought about it for a long time before answering. "I'm not going to lie and say it was easy." I told him, "There were days I wanted to tell you to leave, to never come back, because the hurt was too deep. But you're my son, and I know the difference between someone who's genuinely sorry and someone who's just saying the words. You've shown me every single day through your actions that you understand what you did and that you're different now. That's not the same as erasing what happened. The scars are still there, but scars heal, and we're healing." A year and 2 months after everything fell apart, I turned 54. Daniel asked if he could plan my birthday, and I said yes. It was a small gathering, nothing fancy, just family, which now meant Howard, Daniel, Dr. Thornton, who I considered family after everything we'd been through together, and Marcus and his wife. Vivian didn't come, and I was okay with that, maybe someday, but not yet. Daniel cooked dinner himself, pot roast the way I used to make it, and he only burned it a little. We laughed about that. We ate together at my table, the same table where so many Sunday dinners had happened, where so much poison had been spread, but now it felt clean again, reclaimed. After dinner, Daniel gave me a gift. It was a photo album, and when I opened it, I saw that he'd organized it chronologically. The first half was pictures of us from when he was a baby all the way through his wedding day. Pictures of birthday parties and holidays and graduations. Pictures of a mother and son who loved each other. And then there was a dividing page, and had written on it, "What I almost lost." The second half of the album was pictures from the past year. Me in my hospital bed with Dr. Thornton, Daniel and me at physical therapy, Howard and me watching movies, all of us at Thanksgiving. Simple moments, nothing glamorous, but they were real. And on the last page, had written, "What I found again. Thank you for not giving up on me, Mom. I love you." I held that album and cried, and Daniel put his arm around me and cried too. And Howard came over and wrapped us both in a hug. It wasn't a perfect moment. We weren't a perfect family. The trauma of what we'd been through would always be there. A shadow that we'd have to actively work to not let consume us. But we were together. We were real. We were healing. And that was enough. That was everything. As I sat there, surrounded by the people I loved, blowing out candles on a homemade cake that was slightly lopsided but made with genuine care, I realized something important. I'd learned that love isn't about sacrificing yourself until you disappear. It's not about being so selfless that you accept being treated poorly. Real love requires boundaries, requires respect, requires showing up when it matters. I'd learned that manipulation can happen to anyone, that even smart, capable people can fall victim to psychological predators like Constance. I'd learned that the strongest thing I ever did wasn't surviving surgery, wasn't enduring abandonment. It was fighting for my son, even when he'd given up on me. It was refusing to let Constance win, refusing to disappear quietly. I'd learned that sometimes the people who hurt us most are themselves hurting, and that understanding that doesn't mean we have to accept abuse, but it can help us heal. Vivian had been a victim of her own mother long before Daniel came into the picture. Daniel had been manipulated by someone who'd had decades of practice. And even Howard, in his own way, had been a victim of his own complacency and ignorance. None of that excused what they'd done, but it made it possible to move forward. I made a wish as I blew out those candles, but it wasn't for a perfect family. It was for continued healing, for more days like this one, for the strength to keep choosing forgiveness and hope even when it would be easier to choose bitterness and isolation. Daniel squeezed my shoulder. Howard kissed my forehead, and I felt that wish settling into my bones like a promise. This was enough. This was everything. This was home. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced manipulation in your family? Have you seen someone you love get pulled away by a toxic influence? How did you handle it? Or how are you handling it now? Drop your thoughts and stories in the comments below, because sharing these experiences helps all of us feel less alone. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more true stories about family, betrayal, and ultimately hope. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it. because somewhere out there is a mother sitting alone wondering how she lost her child, and maybe this story will help her understand that she's not crazy and it's not her fault. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope that wherever you are, whatever family struggles you're facing, you find your way through to the other side. Remember, healing is possible, forgiveness is a journey, and you're stronger than you know. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.